Ariel King thought she had everything under control: a successful hotel, a spotless reputation, and the respect of everyone who mattered. But when she looked at the name Evan Marks on her staff roster, fear made her say 4 words that would change everything. "Don't hire him, Dad." What she didn't know was that in less than 24 hours, this same man would risk his life to save hers from a deadly flood, forcing her to confront the ugly truth about her own prejudices. Now, as rumors swirl and her carefully built world threatens to crumble, Ariel must choose between the safety of her reputation and a love that could cost her everything she's worked for. But will her choice come too late to save the one person who saw her heart when she couldn't see his? If you're watching this, subscribe and tell me where you're from, because this story of pride, prejudice, and second chances will leave you questioning everything you think you know about love and redemption. The rain drummed against the lobby windows of the Seaside Manor Hotel like impatient fingers. Ariel King stood behind the front desk, her dark eyes scanning the weekly work roster with a familiar knot of worry in her stomach. The plastic sheeting covering the renovation work fluttered in the air conditioning, making the whole place feel temporary and fragile. She ran her finger down the list of names until she found what made her pause. Marks, Evan, night janitor, temp, a white man during reopening week. Ariel closed her eyes for a moment, remembering last year's disaster, the online reviews that called her unfair, the accusations of favoritism, the way her careful reputation had crumbled in just 48 hours because of one staff member who'd twisted every decision into something ugly. "You look like you swallowed something bitter," said Gabe Ruiz, the maintenance lead, as he walked up with a steaming cup of coffee. His work boots squeaked on the polished floor. "Just thinking about this week," Ariel said, folding the roster. "Dad hired a new night janitor." "Evan?" "Yeah, I met him yesterday. Seems solid." Gabe sipped his coffee. "Want to do the basement walkthrough? Storm's coming in tonight, and I want to check that relief valve one more time." They walked toward the service elevator, passing guests who smiled at Ariel with the kind of warmth that took years to build. She'd worked so hard to earn their trust back after last year's mess. The thought of risking it all again made her chest tight. The basement smelled like fresh paint and dampness. Gabe led her past stacked boxes and renovation supplies to a corner where pipes ran along the ceiling like silver veins. "Hear that humming?" he said, pointing up at a valve that vibrated softly. "It's been doing that since yesterday. Not dangerous, but worth watching." Ariel nodded, though her mind was elsewhere. Through the small basement windows, she could see the street drains already, struggling with the morning rain. Water pooled at the curbs, dark and restless. "The sump pump's reading a little high, too," Gabe continued, checking a gauge on the wall. "Nothing scary, but with this storm—" "We should move the paper records," Ariel said, looking at the boxes of old guest files stacked near the wall. "Just in case." Upstairs, the morning news played on the lobby TV. A weatherwoman pointed at a swirling mass of clouds approaching the coast. "Flash flood warnings remain in effect through this evening," she said with practiced calm. Ariel's father, Martin King, emerged from his office looking every inch the successful hotel owner he was. His gray suit was pressed, his smile warm as he greeted the guests scattered around the lobby reading newspapers and sipping coffee. "Morning, sweetheart," he said, kissing Ariel's cheek. "Ready for the big week?" "As ready as we can be," she said. "Dad, about that new night janitor." "Evan? He comes highly recommended. Former supervisor said he's reliable, good with emergencies." Martin's eyes crinkled with amusement. "Don't worry so much. It's just temporary help for reopening week." But Ariel's worry had roots that ran deep. She remembered the sting of online reviews that called her prejudiced and unprofessional. She remembered watching her staff's respect slip away like sand through her fingers. She couldn't go through that again. "I just think we should be careful," she said. "You know how people talk." Martin studied her face. "Ariel, you can't make decisions based on fear. Judge people by their character, not their circumstances." Easy for him to say. He wasn't the one who'd had to rebuild trust one conversation at a time. The morning stretched on with its familiar rhythm. Guests checked out, new ones arrived, and Ariel moved through her duties with practiced efficiency. But the knot in her stomach remained, tightening every time she thought about the interview scheduled for later that morning. At 9:15, she found herself standing outside her father's office, hand on the doorknob. Through the glass, she could see a man sitting quietly in the chair across from Martin's desk. He had brown hair, clean work clothes, and a red toolbox at his feet. His hands were folded in his lap, patient and still. Rain began to patter harder against the windows. The weatherwoman's warning echoed in Ariel's mind. The basement hummed with that strange valve sound. Everything felt balanced on the edge of something she couldn't name. She turned the doorknob and stepped inside. The man looked up as she entered. His eyes were kind, the color of winter sky. For a moment, she forgot why she was there. "Dad," she heard herself say, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "Don't hire him!" The silence that followed felt like a held breath. The man's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. A door closing, a guard going up. "Ariel," Martin said carefully. "This is Evan Marks. Evan, my daughter and general manager, Ariel King." "Don't hire him, Dad. He's white." The words hung in the air like smoke. Ariel wanted to take them back, to explain that she meant not this week, not during reopening, not when everything was so fragile. But explanations felt impossible with Evan sitting there, still as stone. "I see," Evan said quietly. His voice was steady, without anger or surprise, as if he'd heard this before. Martin cleared his throat. "Evan, tell me about your safety training." "CERT certification," Evan said, his eyes on the desk now. "Community Emergency Response Team. I've done workshops on flood safety, basic rescue techniques." He paused. "I always check building systems at the start of each shift. Log any issues I find." "That's exactly what we need," Martin said, shooting a warning look at Ariel. "Especially this week." Ariel felt heat rise in her cheeks. She'd meant to protect the hotel's reputation, but instead she'd revealed something ugly about herself. The man hadn't done anything wrong. He'd just existed in the wrong place at the wrong time. "I'll let you two finish," she said, backing toward the door. "Actually," Evan said, standing up, "I think I should go. Thank you for your time, Mr. King." "Sit down," Martin said firmly. "Ariel, we'll talk later." She left them there and walked quickly down the hallway, her heels clicking against the tile. At the elevators, she pressed the button and waited, listening to the rain grow stronger against the building. When the doors opened, Evan was inside. He looked at her for a moment, then stepped out without a word. She watched him walk toward the service elevator with Gabe, his toolbox in one hand, shoulders straight despite everything. "Evan wants to check that humming valve," Gabe called over. "Says he heard it from the hallway." The service elevator doors closed behind them, and Ariel was left alone with the sound of rain and her own regret. She'd made a choice based on fear, and it had revealed something about her character that she didn't like. 20 minutes later, she found Gabe in the maintenance room, writing in a logbook. "How's the basement?" she asked. "Evan found the problem," Gabe said without looking up. "Relief valves working too hard because the sump pump's not keeping up. He suggested we monitor it hourly until the storm passes." He showed her the entry. 12:05 p.m., relief valve humming, sump reading high. Recommend hourly checks. EM. "He wrote that at 12:05, Gabe said, "right after we went down there. Guy knows his stuff." Ariel signed off on the log, but her mind was elsewhere. Through the office window, she could see Evan in the laundry room, showing a temporary worker how to properly wring out mops. His movements were patient, precise. No frustration showed on his face, even though she'd just humiliated him in front of her father. The afternoon brought heavier rain and the first rumble of thunder. Guests gathered in the lobby, watching the weather through the tall windows. Children pressed their faces to the glass, delighted by the drama of it all. Ariel decided to move the basement records before the storm got worse. She grabbed the keys in a plastic bin, then headed for the service elevator. Better to be safe than sorry. The basement felt different now, damper. The humming from the relief valve was louder, more insistent. She could hear water running somewhere, but that was normal during a storm. She knelt by the first box of records and started transferring files to the plastic bin. Old guest registrations, maintenance logs, insurance papers, nothing critical, but losing them would be a headache. The lights flickered once, then again. Ariel looked up at the ceiling, where fluorescent tubes hummed behind plastic covers. The building was old but well maintained. Power outages were rare. She kept working, filling the bin with folders and loose papers. The rain drummed against the small basement windows, and somewhere in the building's walls, she could hear the pipes working hard. When she tried to leave, the basement door wouldn't budge. She turned the handle and pushed. Nothing. She put her shoulder against it and tried again. The door was stuck tight, as if something heavy was pressed against it from the other side. Water began seeping under the door. Just a little at first, a dark line that crept across the concrete floor. Then more, spreading like spilled ink. Ariel set down the bin and pulled out her phone to call Gabe. No signal. The water reached her shoes. The emergency lights flickered on as the main power died, casting everything in an eerie yellow glow. Ariel looked around the basement with new eyes. The small windows were at street level. If the storm drains were backing up, if the street was flooding, she was trapped. The water climbed to her ankles, then higher, cold and dark, carrying the smell of rain and earth and things she didn't want to think about. She tried the door again, throwing her full weight against it. The handle turned, but the door might as well have been made of stone. Water pressure from the other side, maybe, or debris washed down the stairs. Her breath came faster now. The plastic bin of records floated past her like a boat carrying paper passengers. The emergency light flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Then she heard footsteps above, heavy boots on the stairs. A voice calling her name. "Ariel, you down there?" It was Evan. "I'm here," she called back. "The door's stuck." "I hear you. Stand back from the door." She moved away, water swirling around her knees now. Through the door, she could hear metal on metal, the sound of something being pried and forced. "I've got a pry bar," Evan called. "This might take a minute." A minute felt like forever. The water kept rising, and Ariel found herself thinking about all the things she should have said differently. The apology she owed, the assumptions she'd made. The door suddenly gave way with a groan of metal and a rush of water. Evan stood in the opening, soaked to the skin, a red toolbox in one hand and a pry bar in the other. Behind him, she could see a linen cart turned on its side. "Can you swim?" he asked. "A little." "The hallway's flooded, but not deep. I'm going to flip this cart right side up. You hold on to the edge, and I'll push you to the stairwell." He spoke like someone who'd done emergency rescues before, calm, clear, focused on the next step instead of the size of the problem. The linen cart worked like a makeshift boat. Ariel gripped the side while Evan waited beside her, one hand on the cart's handle, the other holding his toolbox above the water. "One step at a time," he said when they reached the stairs. "We're okay." They climbed together, water dripping from their clothes, creating puddles on each step. Ariel's hands shook, whether from cold or fear or relief, she couldn't tell. In the lobby, everything was controlled chaos. Space heaters had been set up, and someone had brought towels from the laundry. Guests clustered around the windows, watching the rain with new respect. "EMTs are on their way," Gabe said, wrapping a towel around Ariel's shoulders. "Just to check you over." "I'm fine," she said, but she sank into a lobby chair anyway. Her legs felt unsteady. Evan stood near the front desk, writing in a small notebook. Water still dripped from his hair onto the pages, but his handwriting was steady. "What's that?" Ariel asked. "Incident report," he said without looking up. "Time, cause, conditions. For insurance and safety review." Martin appeared with dry clothes and hot coffee. "Thank God you're both okay," he said, hugging Ariel carefully. "Evan, I can't thank you enough." "Just doing my job," Evan said. He looked at Ariel. "You sure you're all right?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. How could she explain that she felt worse about her morning words than her afternoon rescue? The EMTs arrived and checked them both over. Blood pressure fine, no signs of shock, no injuries, just a scare and some wet clothes. Later, in the staff lounge, Ariel watched Evan finish his incident report. His handwriting was neat, his details precise. At the bottom, she could see him add, "Observed elevated sump reading and relief valve stress at 12:05 p.m. Recommended hourly monitoring." He'd warned them. Before her rudeness, before the flooding, before any of it got serious, he'd seen the problem and tried to prevent it. "Evan," she said. He looked up from his notebook. "Thank you. For everything." He nodded once, then closed the notebook and stood to leave. At the doorway, he paused. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I understand why you were worried. I've been the risk before. The story people don't want. It's okay. But it wasn't okay. Not at all. That night, alone in her apartment, Ariel stood in front of her bathroom mirror and practiced an apology. The words felt clumsy in her mouth, inadequate for the size of her mistake. "I was wrong," she said to her reflection. "I judged you before I knew you, and that was unfair." She tried again. "I let my fear make choices for me." And again. "You saved my life after I insulted you, and I don't know how to make that right." None of it sounded like enough, but tomorrow was a new day, and she would find a way to do better. Outside her window, the storm was passing. The rain had softened to a gentle patter, and somewhere in the distance she could see stars beginning to appear between the clouds. At 6:10 the next morning, before most of the staff arrived, she walked straight to the custodial closet where Evan was coiling wet hoses from the night before. "Can we talk?" she asked. He looked up, wary but not unkind. "I owe you an apology," she said. "A real one. Not because you saved me, but because I was wrong from the start." Evan set down the hose and waited. "I was scared," Ariel continued. "Last year I had a staff situation that got ugly online. People said I was unfair, prejudiced. I spent months rebuilding trust." She took a breath. "When I saw your name on the roster, I panicked. I thought another white staff member would give people ammunition to hurt the hotel's reputation again. So you decided to hurt me instead," Evan said quietly. The words stung because they were true. "Yes, and that was wrong. You didn't deserve that." Evan leaned against the closet wall, studying her face. "What changed your mind?" "You did. The way you handled yesterday. The way you prepared for problems instead of just reacting to them." She gestured toward the basement. "Gabe showed me your 1205 log entry. You saw trouble coming and tried to prevent it." "Part of the job." "No, it's not. Part of the job is cleaning floors and emptying trash cans, warning people about floods. That's character." They stood in silence for a moment, surrounded by mops and cleaning supplies and the smell of industrial soap. "I have a question," Ariel said. "Will you show me what else I missed?" Evan's expression shifted, surprise replacing wariness. "What do you mean?" "Safety things. Problems I should see but don't. I don't want to be the kind of manager who misses important details because she's worried about the wrong things." He considered this. "There are some gaps in the evacuation signage, and the guest room smoke detectors haven't been tested since the renovation started." "Can you show me? We could do a walkthrough, make a list. It won't delay reopening, but it might prevent problems." "You sure you want to be seen working with the white janitor?" The question wasn't bitter, just practical. "I want to be seen working with someone who knows what he's doing," Ariel said. "What people think about that is their problem, not mine." Evan almost smiled. Almost. "Okay, when?" "After lunch? We could walk the stairwells, check sight lines for the emergency exits." "Sounds like a plan." As they talked, Mrs. Delaney shuffled into the lobby, her walker tapping against the tile. She was one of their long-term guests, a gentlewoman in her 70s who'd been staying at the hotel for 3 weeks while her apartment was being renovated. She settled into her usual armchair near the front desk and opened a romance novel, but Ariel noticed her watching their conversation with interested eyes. At 1:15 that afternoon, Ariel met Evan in the main stairwell with a clipboard and some masking tape. The work was simple but important, checking that emergency exit signs were visible from every angle, making sure nothing blocked escape routes. "See that?" Evan said, pointing up at a sign partially hidden by a hanging plant. "In an emergency with smoke or poor lighting, someone might miss it completely." They moved the plant and added a second sign. Small changes, but ones that could save lives. Gabe joined them on the second floor, initially skeptical, but warming up as Evan explained his reasoning for each suggestion. By the third floor, they were working as a team, with Gabe offering his own observations about problem areas he'd noticed. "This guy knows his stuff," Gabe told Ariel quietly as they taped a temporary arrow pointing toward the nearest exit. "I'm starting to see that," she said. At 3:40, they posted the last temporary sign. The walkthrough had taken longer than expected, but it felt like time well spent. "Let me thank you properly," Ariel said as they gathered up the leftover supplies. "Dinner sometime? Nothing fancy, just a way to say I appreciate your patience." Evan hesitated. Lunch would be easier, less complicated. She understood. Dinner felt like a date. Lunch was just colleagues being friendly. "Lunch it is," she said. The next evening found them at a small diner around the corner from the hotel. 2 sandwiches, 2 waters, nothing that would raise eyebrows or start rumors. Evan talked about his sister Sonia and her 4-year-old daughter, who was the light of his life. Ariel shared the story of last year's staff crisis, how a disgruntled employee had twisted her attempts at fair scheduling into accusations of favoritism, then taken the complaints online where they grew into something ugly and untrue. "I spent 6 months rebuilding relationships," she said, picking at her sandwich, "proving that I treat everyone fairly. When I saw your name on the roster, all I could think was, here we go again." "People love a good story," Evan said, "especially if it involves conflict or controversy. Doesn't matter if it's true." "Has that happened to you before?" "Once. Previous job, a supervisor was cutting corners on safety inspections. When I documented it, he said I was making trouble because I wanted his position." Evan's voice stayed level, but she could hear old hurt underneath. Easier to blame the new guy than fix the real problem. "What happened?" "I left. Started over somewhere else." He looked at her across the small table. "Sometimes that's the only choice you have." They finished their meal in comfortable silence, both understanding that they'd shared more than food. They'd shared the weight of being misunderstood, the cost of doing the right thing when others wanted easier answers. That night, Ariel texted him, "Thanks for lunch. Tomorrow. Sign audit at 7? His reply came quickly, "I'll be there." 3 words that felt like a promise. The next morning brought sunshine and the steady hum of a hotel preparing for its grand reopening. At 7:05, Ariel found Evan in the small cafe off the lobby, finishing a cup of coffee after his night shift. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, but he looked alert and ready. "Long night?" she asked, settling into the chair across from him. "Not too bad. Mostly catching up on maintenance logs." He gestured toward a neat stack of papers beside his coffee cup. "Gabe wants everything documented before the inspectors arrive." They were interrupted by the sound of a child's laughter. A young woman with Evan's same gray-blue eyes walked in, holding the hand of a little girl with pigtails and a bright yellow backpack. "Uncle Evan," the child called out, breaking free to run to their table. "Hey, princess," Evan said, scooping her up for a quick hug. "You ready for daycare?" The woman approached more slowly, giving Ariel a curious look. She was pretty in a tired way, with the kind of practical beauty that came from juggling too many responsibilities. "Sonia," Evan said, "this is Ariel King, the hotel's general manager. Ariel, my sister Sonia, and this troublemaker is Maya." "Nice to meet you," Sonia said, her handshake firm. Maya hid behind her mother's legs, suddenly shy. "Would you like a coloring page?" Ariel asked, kneeling down to Maya's level. "We have some behind the front desk, and maybe a couplet to play with." Maya peeked out, interested, despite her shyness. "Can I, Mama?" she whispered. "What do you say?" Sonia prompted. "Please?" Ariel returned with a coloring page showing cartoon dolphins and a clean plastic lid that made a perfect flying disc. Maya settled at a nearby table, chattering happily to herself as she chose her first crayon. "That was kind," Sonia said quietly. "She's been having a hard time with new people lately." "Kids need to feel welcome," Ariel said simply. "This is her uncle's workplace." Something shifted in Sonia's expression. Later, as they were leaving for daycare, Ariel heard her tell Evan, "She's kind. That matters." The morning passed quickly. Ariel and Evan finished their safety audit, with Gabe joining them to add electrical concerns to their growing list. As they worked, guests began to notice the general manager talking extensively with the maintenance staff. Most seemed pleased that she was hands-on. Others watched with more calculating expressions. At 11:20, as they put finishing touches on the emergency signage, Mrs. Delaney's friend from room 237 walked by with her phone out. The camera clicked once, capturing Ariel and Evan examining an exit sign together. "Excuse me," the woman said brightly. "Could I get a photo of you two for my social media? It's so nice to see management really working with their team." Ariel's stomach clenched, but she managed a smile. "Just doing our job," she said. Later, she would wish she'd said no. By 3 in the afternoon, Gabe pulled Ariel aside in the maintenance office. His usually cheerful face was serious. "I owe you an apology," he said. About Evan. What do you mean? Gabe pulled out his logbook and flipped to Tuesday's entries. Look at this. 12:05 p.m. Sump reading high. Relief valve strain. Recommended hourly monitoring. He turned the page. Tuesday night. Checked basement twice. Logged water levels. There's another page. Wednesday morning. Suggested moving old files before the storm peaked. Ariel read the neat handwriting, the precise times, the careful observations. He was trying to prevent the flood from the moment he saw the signs, Gabe continued, and before that, he did CERT training on his own time. Community Emergency Response Team. Guy knows rescue protocols. Why didn't you tell me this before? Figured you'd see it for yourself. Plus, Gabe's expression grew uncomfortable. He asked me not to make a big deal about it, said he didn't want special treatment. That evening, as the sun set behind the hotel's top floor, Ariel found herself thinking about assumptions and first impressions. Mrs. Delaney appeared beside her chair in the lobby like a gentle ghost, settling her small frame into the neighboring seat. Busy day? The older woman asked. Getting ready for reopening, Ariel said, making sure everything's perfect. Perfect's a hard standard, Mrs. Delaney observed. Sometimes good enough is good enough, especially when it comes from a good heart. She was quiet for a moment, then added, Fear makes small rooms smaller, but kindness opens doors. Mrs. Delaney patted Ariel's hand with fingers that felt like paper and wisdom, then rose to continue her evening walk. At 8 o'clock, Ariel found Evan on the hotel's small rooftop terrace, checking that the emergency beacon light was working properly. The city spread out below them, twinkling with evening lights, and the air smelled clean after yesterday's rain. Mind some company? She asked, carrying 2 cups of tea from the kitchen. Sure, he accepted the tea gratefully. Long day. They sat on the small bench facing west, where the last light painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. For a while, they just watched the city settle into evening. Can I ask you something? Ariel said finally. What's it like? Being the one people look at sideways? Evan was quiet for so long, she thought he wouldn't answer. When he did, his voice was thoughtful. Depends on the day. Sometimes it's just background noise, people making assumptions, moving away on elevators, that kind of thing. Other times, he paused, other times it's more direct, like yesterday morning. I'm sorry. I know, but sorry doesn't change how it felt. He looked at her. Can I ask you something? Of course. What's it like being the one who has to be perfect? Always proving yourself, never getting the benefit of the doubt? The question surprised her with its insight. Exhausting, she said honestly. Every decision gets examined twice as hard. Every mistake becomes evidence that you don't belong. So we both know what it's like to be the story people want to tell about someone else. I guess we do. They finished their tea as stars began to appear overhead. When they stood to go back inside, their hands brushed accidentally, and neither pulled away immediately. Both smiled at the small contact, the promise of something tentative but real. Tomorrow's going to be interesting, Evan said. Reopening prep, inspections, all the final details. We'll manage, Ariel said. We make a good team. The next morning arrived with the kind of bureaucratic chaos that made Ariel grateful for careful preparation. Health inspectors arrived early, followed by fire safety officials, then a team from the tourism board. Everyone had clipboards and questions and very serious expressions. At 7:30, Ariel's phone buzzed during the morning staff meeting. A text from her college roommate. Saw this on Instagram. You famous now? Attached was a screenshot of a social media post. The photo from yesterday showed her and Evan examining the exit sign, but the caption read, GM and her rescuer getting cozy, our hotel romance, our flood rescue, fark interesting. The comments underneath made Ariel's breakfast turn to stone in her stomach. Mixing business with pleasure much? Wonder if he gets special treatment now. That didn't take long, lol. Hope she's not playing favorites. Her phone buzzed again. Another screenshot, another post. This one showed them on the rooftop terrace, heads close together over their teacups. Someone had been watching from a neighboring building. Everything okay? Asked Janet from housekeeping. Fine, Ariel managed, but her voice sounded thin even to her own ears. By lunch, the posts had multiplied. Not viral, but enough to create whispers in corners and meaningful looks from the other staff members. Ariel felt the familiar dread rising, the sense that she was losing control of a narrative she'd never meant to create. At 2:15, Martin called her into his office. His expression was gentle but concerned. "Ariel, honey, I need you to keep appearances calm this week. The tourism board is, watching everything, and with the reopening—" He trailed off, but his meaning was clear. "I understand," she said, though understanding and liking were two different things. She texted Evan, "Let's keep lunch low-key today." His response came immediately. "Everything all right?" She didn't know how to answer that. At 4:20, the afternoon mail brought something that made everything worse. An email forwarded from HR, originally sent by someone identified as Regional Manager, Coastal Cleaning Services. RE. Employee Background Check, Evan Marks. While I cannot provide specific details, I feel obligated to flag patterns of behavior that have raised concerns in previous positions. Ariel's hands shook as she read the carefully worded implications. Nothing specific enough to be actionable, but enough to plant seeds of doubt. The email was dated that morning, sent to 3 people in the hotel's management chain. HR would have to investigate now. It was policy. At 8:40 that evening, she found Evan in the service corridor, organizing cleaning supplies with mechanical precision. His face was carefully neutral, but she could see tension in the set of his shoulders. "Heard about the HR review," he said without looking up. "If this complicates things for you, I understand." "It doesn't change anything," Ariel said quickly. "Doesn't it?" He finally met her eyes. "Your dad already asked you to keep things calm. Now there's an investigation, social media posts, people talking." He was quiet for a moment. "I told you I'd been the risk before. Seems like I still am." "That's not fair." "Fair doesn't matter. What matters is that you worked hard to build something here, and I don't want to be the reason it falls apart." The words hung between them, honest and painful. "Just give me a day," Ariel said finally. "Let me figure this out." Evan nodded, but she could see something dimming behind his eyes. Protection, distance, the same look he'd had in Martin's office that first morning. The next morning, Ariel stood in the empty ballroom where they held staff meetings, facing Evan across an expanse of polished floor. Early light streamed through tall windows, making everything look softer than it felt. "I need some space," she said, "just until the HR review clears up and things settle down." "I figured," Evan said. His voice was steady, but she could hear the hurt underneath. "Probably for the best." "It's not what I want," she said desperately. "It's just practical." "I know." He managed a small smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'll stick to the back-of-house duties. Keep things simple." For the rest of the day, Ariel felt his absence like a missing tooth. She caught herself looking for him in corners where he no longer appeared, listening for his voice in conversations he was no longer part of. During the final inspection walkthrough, she found herself explaining emergency procedures that he had taught her, using knowledge he had shared. Mrs. Delaney watched her rearrange the same table setting 3 times during dinner service. "Regret's a heavy thing to carry," the older woman observed gently. That night, Ariel lay awake scrolling through the social media posts again and again. The comments weren't even that harsh, just curious, mildly gossipy, the kind of thing that would be forgotten in a week. But they felt enormous in the darkness of her bedroom, like proof that she was making the same mistakes all over again. At 2 a.m, she finally understood what was really happening. She wasn't protecting the hotel's reputation, she was protecting her own fear. And Evan was paying the price for both. 16:17. The next morning arrived gray and uncertain, with clouds that couldn't decide whether to rain or shine. Ariel stood at her apartment window, watching the city wake up, and realized she was tired of making decisions based on what other people might think. At 7:10, she found Mrs. Delaney in the hotel's breakfast nook, cutting her grapefruit with surgical precision. The older woman looked up with knowing eyes as Ariel approached. "May I?" Ariel asked, gesturing to the empty chair. "Please," Mrs. Delaney said, setting down her spoon. "You look like someone who needs to talk." "I think I've been making mistakes," Ariel said, "big ones." "The heart makes mistakes," Mrs. Delaney said gently. "But fear doesn't make mistakes. It just makes the same choice over and over again, even when that choice stops working. What do you mean? You can't bubble wrap a heart and still use it, dear. At some point, you have to choose what you're protecting, your reputation or your happiness. Mrs. Delaney's words settled into Ariel like seeds finding soil. She excused herself and went straight to the maintenance office where Gabe was sorting through work orders for the day. I need to see everything, she said without preamble. Every log entry, every report, every piece of documentation we have about Evan's work here. Gabe raised an eyebrow, but pulled out a thick folder. What's this about? Making sure I have all the facts before I make any more assumptions. For the next 2 hours, Ariel read everything. Evan's initial application, with references from 3 previous employers. Gabe's notes about his CERT certification and emergency training. The detailed logs from the day of the flood, showing his 12:05 observation about the sump pump and his repeated basement checks throughout the storm. Most telling was the incident addendum he'd written after the rescue. Instead of making himself the hero, he'd focused on system failures and prevention strategies. Recommend monthly sump pump maintenance and quarterly relief valve inspection, he'd written. Early warning systems could prevent future incidents. At 12:20, Gabe spread out the maintenance logs on his desk like a detective laying out evidence. See this pattern? He said, pointing to entries over the past week. Every shift, he documents what he finds. Loose handrail on the 3rd floor, flickering light in the west stairwell, wobbly table in room 205. He's thorough, Ariel said. More than thorough. He's careful. The kind of careful that prevents accidents before they happen. Gabe looked at her seriously. Whatever HR found, or thinks they found, it doesn't match the work I've seen. At 3 that afternoon, Ariel's phone rang. HR calling with an update. We've completed the preliminary review, said Janet from the HR department. The concerns raised appear to be unfounded. Mr. Marks's references check out completely, and his former supervisor's complaint seems to be retaliatory. We're closing the file. Relief flooded through Ariel like cool water. Thank you, she managed. No problem. These things happen. Sometimes people have personal grudges that follow them around. After hanging up, Ariel sat in her office for a long moment, staring at her phone. Then she typed a text message. Off-site coffee at 6? I want to say the right words, not the safe ones. Evan's response took 20 minutes. Okay. At 6 o'clock, they met at a small park 2 blocks from the hotel. The evening was soft and warm, with the kind of light that made everything look like a painting. They found a bench facing a small pond where ducks paddled lazily near the shore. HR cleared you, Ariel said without preamble. The complaint was bogus. I figured it would be, Evan said. But that's not really what this is about, is it? She turned to face him on the bench. I owe you an apology, a bigger one than I gave you before. For what? For letting fear be my compass. Again. She took a breath. Those social media posts scared me, not because they were true, but because they reminded me of last year. I panicked and pushed you away to protect something that didn't need protecting. Evan was quiet for a moment, watching the ducks navigate the still water. You know what's funny? He said finally. I've spent most of my adult life being the guy people worry about, the one who might cause problems just by existing in the wrong place at the wrong time. That's not fair. No, it's not, but it's reality. He looked at her. I understand why you were scared. I've been the scandal before, the story that gets told whether I want to be or not. I don't want you to be a story, Ariel said. I want you to be you. Just you. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun began to set behind the trees. A family of geese waddled past, followed by a line of goslings that made them both smile. If we try this again, Evan said carefully, I need it to be honest. No secrecy, no hiding. Slow and open, whatever that looks like. I want that too, Ariel said. No more decisions based on what other people might think. And if people talk? Then they talk. But they'll be talking about the truth, not about lies or fears or assumptions. As if to seal the agreement, Evan reached over and took her hand. His palm was warm and slightly rough from work, and his fingers interlaced with hers like they belonged there. So what now? He asked. Now we see what happens when we choose courage instead of fear, Ariel said, one day at a time. They parted with a brief hug that felt like a promise. The next morning, Ariel found herself looking forward to work for the first time in days. At 9 o'clock Saturday morning, she met Evan and Martin at the corner cafe Martin had suggested. The breakfast rush was winding down, leaving the place pleasantly quiet. "Thank you for inviting me," Martin said as they settled around a small table by the window. "I wanted a chance to talk with both of you." "About what?" Ariel asked, though she suspected she knew. "About boundaries," Martin said simply. "At work, I need you both to be professional. No special treatment, no different standards. Ariel, that means fair scheduling and equal expectations. Evan, that means no favors or shortcuts." "Understood," Evan said. "Good. Outside of work?" Martin smiled. "That's your business. I just ask that you be respectful of each other and thoughtful about how your relationship affects the team." They were interrupted by the arrival of Sonia and Maya, who burst through the cafe door with the energy that only 4-year-olds possessed. "Uncle Evan," Maya called, running to their table. "Mama said we could have pancakes." Sonia followed more slowly, offering apologetic smiles to the other customers. "Sorry we're late. Someone couldn't decide between 2 different hair ribbons." "The purple one was prettier, but the yellow one matched my shirt," Maya explained seriously. "Clearly an important decision," Ariel said, earning a gap-toothed grin. As they waited for their food, Maya entertained them with stories about her daycare friends and elaborate plans for the playground later. Sonia and Martin fell into easy conversation about the neighborhood, while Ariel and Evan shared amused looks across the table. It felt natural, like family, or the beginning of one. At 11:30, they stood outside the cafe in the morning sunshine. Maya was already tugging on Sonia's hand, eager to get to the playground she'd been promised. "This was nice," Sonia said to Ariel. "Maybe we could do it again sometime." "I'd like that," Ariel said, and meant it. Martin headed back to the hotel for a meeting with the tourism board. Sonia and Maya departed for their playground adventure. Ariel and Evan found themselves alone on the sidewalk, the morning stretching ahead of them. "Walk with me?" Evan asked. They strolled through the neighborhood past small shops and cafes, talking about everything and nothing. The conversation felt easy, unforced, like they'd known each other much longer than a week. At the corner where their paths would diverge, Ariel heading home, Evan to his sister's apartment for lunch, they paused. "See you Monday?" he asked. "See you Monday," she agreed. He squeezed her hand once before letting go, and Ariel found herself smiling as she walked away. Monday morning brought the official reopening of the Seaside Manor Hotel. Staff gathered at 7:20 for the final briefing, everyone in fresh uniforms with nervous energy and excited smiles. "Remember," Martin said from behind the front desk, "we're not trying to be perfect. We're trying to be welcoming, professional, and safe. Everything else will follow." Ariel assigned roles with care, making sure everyone knew their responsibilities. Evan was scheduled for back-of-house maintenance, keeping the systems running smoothly while staying out of the public areas during peak hours. Fair treatment, no favoritism, just practical management. The first guests began arriving at 8, families with children excited about the beach, business travelers checking their phones and grabbing coffee, an elderly couple celebrating their anniversary with a weekend getaway. By noon, the hotel hummed with satisfied activity. The renovation was complete, the staff was functioning smoothly, and the guests seemed genuinely pleased with their experience. At 2 in the afternoon, an alarm test went smoothly. All exits clearly marked, evacuation routes unobstructed, staff responding with calm efficiency. The careful preparation showed. At 8:10 that evening, Ariel stood on the front steps of the hotel, watching the last of the dinner guests settle into the cafe. The reopening had gone better than she dared to hope. No crises, no complaints, just the steady rhythm of hospitality done well. Through the lobby windows, she could see Evan talking with Gabe near the service elevators. Both men were laughing about something, the easy camaraderie of colleagues who'd learned to trust each other's work. "Proud of what you've built here," said a voice behind her. Mrs. Delaney stood in the doorway, her small suitcase beside her. Tomorrow was checkout day. Her apartment renovation was finally complete. "Thank you," Ariel said, "for everything. Your advice, your patience with all the construction noise." "My pleasure, dear." Mrs. Delaney's eyes twinkled. though I suspect the most important construction here wasn't to the building. She was right, of course. Some things had been built, others torn down and rebuilt better. Trust, understanding, the courage to choose hope over fear. As Mrs. Delaney headed inside to pack her final belongings, Ariel allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, everything felt possible. 16:20. Tuesday brought the kind of steady hotel rhythm that Ariel had dreamed of during the long renovation months. Guests checked out with genuine smiles, new arrivals settled in with minimal fuss, and the staff moved through their duties with quiet confidence. At 12:05, the same time Evan had first logged the sump pump warning a week ago, Martin gathered the team in the main lobby for a brief thank you ceremony. Nothing elaborate, just recognition for work well done. "I want to acknowledge everyone who made this reopening possible," Martin said, his voice carrying easily through the space. "From housekeeping to maintenance to front desk, you've all gone above and beyond." He called out specific contributions: Janet for managing the guest services transition, Carlos for keeping the kitchen running during equipment installation, Gabe for coordinating all the technical systems. "And I want to especially recognize Gabe and Evan for their safety preparations," Martin continued. "Their attention to detail prevented what could have been a much worse situation during last week's flooding." Ariel watched the staff's faces as her father spoke. Nods of agreement, genuine appreciation for colleagues' work. No raised eyebrows or meaningful glances when Evan's name was mentioned alongside Gabe's. Just professional acknowledgement of professional contribution. Mrs. Delaney, sitting in her favorite lobby chair for the last time, started the applause. It was soft but steady, the kind of appreciation that felt real. After the meeting dispersed, Ariel found a small note tucked into her office mailbox. Plain hotel stationery, neat handwriting. "Thank you for seeing what I didn't. A." She smiled, recognizing Evan's careful script, then slipped the note into her desk drawer next to the maintenance logs that told the real story of the past week. At 5:30 that afternoon, she climbed to the rooftop terrace with 2 paper bags from the corner deli. Simple sandwiches, nothing fancy, but the gesture felt significant. Daylight instead of evening shadows, open space instead of hidden corners. Evan was already there, checking the emergency beacon light one more time before his shift ended. He looked up as she approached, his expression warming when he saw the food. "Dinner?" he asked. "If you want, or we could call it what it is, 2 people who enjoy each other's company sharing a meal." They sat on the small bench facing the city, unwrapping sandwiches and watching the late afternoon light paint everything golden. The conversation flowed easily between work topics and personal stories, the comfortable mix of people who were learning to trust each other. "I've been thinking about the future," Ariel said as they finished eating. "Not just the hotel, but this. Us. What about it? I want to be honest about the pace. Not rushing, but not hiding either." She turned to face him. "I'd like to meet more of your family. Have you meet more of mine. Maybe attend some of Maya's soccer games together." Evan smiled. "She has one this Saturday. Sonia usually packs a cooler and makes a whole afternoon of it. I'd like that." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the rooftop, they sat closer together. When Evan reached for her hand, Ariel didn't hesitate to intertwine their fingers. "We're really doing this," he said. It wasn't a question. "We're really doing this," she agreed. Below them, the hotel hummed with evening activity. Guests heading out to dinner, families returning from beach days, the steady rhythm of a business running smoothly. It felt like a foundation, something solid to build on. Saturday morning arrived bright and clear, perfect weather for youth soccer. Ariel met Evan and Sonia at the neighborhood park where 8-year-olds in colorful jerseys ran around a field with more enthusiasm than coordination. "She's number 7, Sonia said, pointing to a determined little girl with pigtails streaming behind her as she chased the ball. "Defense. She's very serious about not letting anyone past her." Martin arrived during the second quarter with a cooler full of lemonade and sandwiches. He'd insisted on contributing to the family gathering, claiming he needed to properly evaluate this soccer program for potential hotel guest recommendations. "Plus," he'd told Ariel with a wink, "I want to see what this child is made of. Character shows early." Maya's character was evident in spades. She played with fierce concentration, encouraging her teammates and politely helping opponents who fell down. During halftime, she ran straight to their little gathering. "Did you see me block that goal?" she asked breathlessly. "We saw," Evan said, kneeling to retie her loose shoelace. "You were amazing." "Are you Uncle Evan's girlfriend?" Maya asked Ariel with the directness that only children possessed. "I'm his friend," Ariel said carefully. "A very good friend." "Good," Maya said matter-of-factly. "He needs more friends. Mama says he works too much." During the third quarter, Mrs. Delaney appeared at the edge of the field, walking slowly but steadily with her cane. She'd promised to stop by if her morning errands brought her to this part of town. "How lovely," she said as Martin helped her settle onto their blanket. Nothing like watching young people discover what they're capable of. Ariel wasn't sure if she meant the soccer players or the adults, but both seemed accurate. Maya's team won 3-2, a victory celebrated with juice boxes and cookies that someone's grandmother had baked. As parents and grandparents gathered their gear and headed home, Ariel found herself reluctant for the afternoon to end. "Ice cream," Sonia suggested. "I know a place with outdoor tables." They walked through the neighborhood in a loose group, Maya skipping ahead with Martin, who was asking serious questions about her defensive strategies. Sonia and Mrs. Delaney discussing the best local shops, Ariel and Evan bringing up the rear, hands linked, talking quietly about everything and nothing. At the ice cream shop, Maya insisted on ordering for everyone after careful consultation about preferences. She took her role as hostess very seriously, making sure Mrs. Delaney had extra napkins and that everyone had tried her chocolate chip mint combination. "She's going to be a good manager someday," Martin observed. "Pays attention to details and takes care of people." "Just like her uncle," Ariel said, catching Evan's eye across the small table. As the afternoon wound down, they walked Mrs. Delaney to her car, a process that involved multiple hugs and promises to stay in touch. Maya presented her with a flower picked from the park, slightly wilted but given with such sincerity that the older woman's eyes grew misty. "You take care of each other," Mrs. Delaney said, looking meaningfully at Ariel and Evan. "Life's too short for anything less than the real thing." Later, as they said goodbye in the parking lot, Ariel hugged Sonia impulsively. "Thank you for today," she said, "for including me." "Thank you for making my brother smile like that," Sonia replied quietly. "It's been a while since I've seen him this happy." As they drove away in separate cars, Ariel caught sight of Evan in a rearview mirror, walking to his truck with Maya riding piggyback, both of them laughing about something she couldn't hear but could feel the joy of. Sunday evening found her back at the hotel, doing a final check before the start of another week. The lobby was peaceful, with a few guests reading in the comfortable chairs and soft jazz playing from the sound system. Evan was just finishing his shift, updating the maintenance logs with his usual precision. They'd developed an easy routine, a few minutes of conversation about the day's issues, any concerns for tomorrow, the comfortable exchange of two professionals who'd learned to work well together. "Everything quiet tonight?" she asked, settling into the chair beside his small desk. "All good. Replaced a light bulb in room 312, fixed a wobbly table in the cafe. Nothing dramatic." "I like not dramatic," Ariel said. "Dramatic was exhausting." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, listening to the hotel's evening sounds, elevator doors opening and closing, distant laughter from the cafe, the hum of air conditioning and the soft whisper of people settling in for the night. "I've been thinking," Evan said, "about what Mrs. Delaney said, about life being too short." "What about it?" "I spent a lot of years playing it safe, staying small, not risking much, not expecting much." He looked at her. "I don't want to do that anymore." "What do you want to do instead?" "I want to choose you," he said simply. "Every day, in all the ways that matter. Not hiding, not apologizing for it, not letting other people's opinions make our choices." Ariel felt something settle in her chest, warm and solid and right. "I want to choose you too, and us, and whatever we build together." Outside, the city sparkled with evening lights. Tomorrow would bring new guests, new challenges, new opportunities to prove themselves as individuals and as a team. But tonight, sitting in the quiet lobby of the hotel she loved, with the man who'd shown her the difference between fear and wisdom, everything felt exactly as it should be. So what now? Evan asked, echoing their conversation from the park bench a week ago. Now we see what happens when two people choose love over fear, Ariel said, reaching for his hand. One day at a time. Through the tall lobby windows, stars began to appear in the clear sky. Somewhere in the distance, the ocean whispered against the shore with the eternal rhythm of tides and time and all the possibilities that came with having the courage to begin again. They sat together in the peaceful space they'd both learned to call home, no longer the general manager and the night janitor, no longer the woman afraid of judgment and the man tired of being judged. Just Ariel and Evan, choosing each other, and the ordinary miracle of love lived honestly, one quiet moment at a time. The end.